It all starts on June 19, 1990, when someone suddenly finds himself trapped inside the Backrooms. Terrified, he wanders around in panic, desperately trying to find a way out, but there's no exit anywhere. He starts yelling for help, screaming that nobody's been able to get him out of there, but his voice just fades away inside that endless maze, like nobody can hear him at all. Then suddenly, a loud noise breaks the silence, like something heavy just crashed nearby. He carefully walks toward it, only to realize there's nothing there. He keeps moving through the yellowish hallways, searching for some kind of escape. Along the way, he comes across a weird sign, a bunch of papers scattered on the floor, a few pens resting on a cushion, and a disturbing stain on the ceiling. Then he hears another noise. This time, a dark figure suddenly appears out of nowhere. Horrified, he takes off running as fast as he can, rushing through countless hallways until he reaches some kind of strange virtual reality room. Desperate, he tries opening another door, but it's completely sealed shut. When he turns around to go back, the figure finally catches him, violently knocks him to the ground, and both him and his camera come crashing down with him. And that's how the disturbing story of the Backrooms begins. After that, the story completely shifts, and we meet a little girl named Mary, whose handprint is pressed into the cement right next to her mother's. It's a memory from her childhood, but years have passed, and now Mary stands there watching that house get demolished right in front of her eyes. Their handprints are still there, the last trace of a past slowly disappearing. Later on, we meet Clark, who arrives at Dr. Mary Kline's office for another therapy session. Mary tells him he's alone, but he says that's not true, that he's got employees and clients. Still, she insists that even with all of that, he's still completely alone. Clark finally admits he's done terrible things, that he's hurt people, and maybe he deserves that loneliness. But Mary explains that if he truly wants to find a new path, he has to face his past. To help him do that, she suggests repeating an exercise they'd already practiced before, a role-playing exercise. Mary asks him to mentally go back to the night his wife Barbara left him and threw him out of the house. Clark relives the moment. He'd gotten home late, and Barbara was asleep, but while moving around the kitchen, he accidentally knocked over and shattered a glass. The noise startled her awake, and she rushed downstairs to see what had happened. That's when everything spiraled out of control. Clark had been drinking, and he felt ashamed, frustrated, and furious with himself. Even though he tried apologizing for waking her up, the conversation escalated fast. Clark brings up the fact that he knows Barbara wants children, but she immediately pushes back, and the two of them start arguing. She accuses him of never understanding her ambitions, while he, blinded by anger, snaps back that he pays for absolutely everything: her college, her expenses, her nights out, every single one of her whims. Then he accuses her of eventually leaving him stuck with all the responsibility if they ever had kids, while she'd keep chasing her dreams. Finally, Clark completely loses it, screaming that he's an architect, that he carries everything on his own, and that Barbara never helped him with anything. As he relives the argument in front of Mary, he finally lets everything out. Later, we see him filming a commercial to promote his furniture store, but the whole thing turns into a disaster when the chair he's sitting on suddenly breaks beneath him, sending him crashing to the floor while he screams in frustration. The truth is devastating. Nobody visits his business, nobody buys his products, and Clark is trapped under constant pressure as he watches everything he built slowly begin to fall apart. When they finally come to inspect the electric meter, Clark ends up arguing with the technician again. Annoyed, he complains that they should lower his power bill since several lights in the store keep flickering non-stop. While checking the fuse box, they discover two extra switches that seem really strange. They decide to test the first one, but absolutely nothing happens. Then they flip the second switch, and again, nothing happens. Confused, neither of them can figure out what they're for or why they're positioned horizontally, like they were never part of the original system. Later, we see Mary alone in her apartment watching a motivational ad about changing your life. The strange part is that it's actually her own commercial as a therapist. As she tries to eat something, she can barely take a bite. In that moment, we clearly see the same handprint from the beginning, the one pressed into the cement outside her childhood home, a memory that still haunts her. At the same time, Clark is watching TV when the screen suddenly shuts off, but then he realizes the electricity is still working. He turns on a couple lamps, and we discover he's actually been sleeping inside his own furniture store after getting kicked out of his house. Not long after that, the lights start flickering violently again. Uncomfortable and frustrated, Clark decides to go for a drive to clear his head. While driving through the city, Clark listens to one of Dr. Mary Kline's podcasts. Without even realizing it, he eventually ends up outside his old house, staring at it from across the street like he's still holding on to a life he already lost. The next morning, he tries distracting himself by sketching on a piece of paper inside his store, while Mary, on the other hand, finds herself reliving memories from her childhood after watching a little girl standing beside her mother. Later on, Clark turns the TV back on, but this time, something even stranger happens. Images of wires and electrical connections from the fuse box suddenly appear on the screen. Seconds later, the TV shuts off again, and a single light turns on somewhere in the corner of the store. Furious, Clark rushes over to the fuse box and starts flipping every switch off one by one until the entire building is swallowed by darkness. But then he notices something impossible. A thin, glowing line suddenly appears across one of the walls, like a bright crack flickering on and off. Curious, he slowly walks toward it and reaches out to touch it. The second his hand makes contact with the surface, he's violently pulled through to the other side. Clark crashes hard into a back room. Dazed and confused, he realizes the place is filled with piles of furniture. Without understanding what's happening, he manages to pass back through the wall and return to the real world, but his curiosity ends up stronger than his fear. He decides to cross over again and explore what else might be hidden inside that impossible place. He wanders through endless hallways until he comes across several empty rooms. Eventually, he stops in front of a sign that says, "Stop," but right beside it, he notices a half-open door leading into another room. As soon as he steps inside, he finds a dead bird lying on the floor, covered in blood. Further ahead, he discovers even larger rooms, filled with chairs scattered in every direction. Then, he hears a voice. It sounds like a woman speaking French. A few moments later, a man's voice joins in too. Following the sound, Clark spots a motionless figure standing in the distance. Without thinking much about it, he slowly approaches, only to realize it's just a cardboard cutout connected to a radio. Suddenly, multiple voices begin playing at the same time in different languages. Intrigued, Clark follows the cable attached to the figure until he reaches another door. He tries opening it, shoving against it with all his strength, but it's completely sealed shut. Clark takes a closer look around the strange place and finally discovers a small, hidden door, almost like some kind of secret hiding spot. When he opens it, he finds an abandoned backpack sitting beside the entrance to a narrow tunnel. Curious, he searches through the backpack and finds multiple ID belonging to different people he's never heard of. That only makes him even more uneasy. But despite that, he decides to keep moving through the narrow passageway. After crawling through it, he enters another unsettling room. On the floor, there are sandals and shoes, partially sunk into the ground, almost like they're trapped in quicksand. But when Clark steps onto the surface, it feels completely solid beneath his feet. There's also a single chair sitting alone in the middle of the room. Confused, he notices a hole in the floor. When he looks down, he sees a massive pile of chairs stacked countless feet below him. As he leans in for a better look, he suddenly hears a strange noise. Following the sound, he moves back toward the tunnel he came through and catches a glimpse of a figure collapsing violently on the other side. Alarmed, Clark searches for another way out and finds a small side door. He steps through it and suddenly ends up back in front of the same sign he saw earlier. Stop! Disoriented, he retraces his steps back to the area filled with furniture and tries escaping through the glowing wall, the same way he did the first time. But this time, it doesn't work. After several failed attempts, he finally manages to cross back into the real world. Curious, he enters the back rooms one more time, and this time, he grabs a bench from inside. With a huge amount of effort, he manages to drag it out with him into the real world. That's the moment Clark realizes everything is real. For the first time, he's finally able to calm down. Meanwhile, we see that someone has been watching Clark's every move through hidden surveillance cameras. It's Phil, silently monitoring everything happening inside the back rooms. Later on, Clark visits Dr. Mary Kline. The moment she sees him, she notices how exhausted and shaken he looks. Clark explains that he discovered an impossible place hidden inside his store. He tries describing it as some kind of infinite extension of the building, like there's another massive version of the store existing behind the wall. He tells her about everything he saw, including the furniture, the endless hallways, and the strange figures lurking inside. Mary listens with obvious skepticism. To her, the whole story sounds so absurd that it feels completely made up. But Clark keeps insisting and shows her a map he's been drawing, a maze-like layout that seems to keep expanding endlessly. Even then, Mary still can't fully believe him. Offended, Clark angrily gets up and tells her he'll come back with proof. Before leaving, he says that when he does, she'll owe him an apology because he's not lying. Determined to prove the truth, Clark tracks down Kat and her boyfriend Bobby, the same cameramen who film his commercials, and asks for their help investigating what's happening inside the store. The next day, the three of them return to the building fully prepared for the expedition. Clark explains the plan. They're all gonna stay tied together with safety ropes, and they'll carry supplies with them. He also shows them the marks he left both at the entrance and throughout the backrooms, so they won't lose their way. Kat and Bobby don't fully believe him, at least not until they pass through the wall themselves. The experience leaves them completely stunned. Bobby goes in first, followed by Kat, who really has no choice but to come along. As they move deeper inside, they start asking who all the piled-up furniture belongs to. Clark admits he has no idea, but insists they'll eventually figure it out. Bobby records every single detail with his camera while they explore. At one point, Clark mentions seeing something like an empty swimming pool farther ahead. Near that area, they come across a vertical tunnel. Since Bobby's the one carrying the camera, they decide he should be the one to go down. They secure him with a rope so they can pull him back up afterward, and slowly, he begins descending into the darkness. Once he reaches the bottom, he discovers piles of old, dirty clothes scattered all over the floor. Further ahead, he finds another room filled with abandoned clothing and deteriorating objects. He also spots the broken remains of the strange cardboard figure they saw earlier. In another nearby room, a light flickers on and off intermittently. Bobby tries getting closer, but the rope has already reached its limit. Then, as he turns around, he notices something horrifying. A shadow seems to be moving, following him. Panicked, he immediately screams for them to pull him back up. Clark and Kat yank hard on the rope and manage to get him out just in time. Even though Clark and Kat manage to start pulling Bobby back up, they can't release the rope in time. Suddenly, a brutal force yanks him from below, and Bobby is violently dragged back down into the depths. Clark and Kat desperately try holding onto him, pulling with everything they've got to save him, but it's useless. The force ends up dragging both of them down the tunnel too. They crash hard at the bottom, and through the chaos, they barely catch a glimpse of some strange creature dragging Bobby's body away into the darkness. Seconds later, all that's left behind is a trail of blood. Desperate, Kat runs after her boyfriend, while Clark tries to follow her, but he quickly gets lost inside the endless maze of hallways. Clark sprints through room after room until he suddenly reaches a place that feels completely out of place. A room centered around a Christmas tree. Beside it stands a statue illuminated by a single lamp. Then, out of nowhere, a strange, feminine-looking figure appears and tries to grab him. Terrified, Clark runs for his life without looking back until he finally reaches the empty swimming pool he mentioned earlier. From there, he hears Kat's voice screaming for help. He drops the camera onto the floor and runs to try reaching her, but he can't find her anywhere. While he's distracted searching for her, an unknown hand suddenly picks up the camera, and the footage cuts out instantly. At that moment, the story shifts into the past. We see a little girl slowly approaching the window of her bedroom. It's Mary as a child. Curious, she pulls away the newspapers covering the glass so she can look outside. But right then, her mother suddenly appears and scolds her. She tells Mary she must never leave the house, that everything outside is dangerous and bad people are everywhere. Mary was basically raised trapped inside that home. Then suddenly, someone rings the doorbell. Seconds later, a violent explosion shakes the entire house. Back in the present, adult Mary stands frozen, remembering that traumatic moment while staring at the imprint of her hand in the cement, the only memory she still has from that day. Then her phone rings. It's Clark. His voice sounds shaken as he tells her he finally found the way through and that he's not planning to come back. Disturbed and intrigued, Mary immediately decides to head to the store. Meanwhile, we once again see Phil monitoring everything through the hidden cameras inside the backrooms. On one of the screens, Clark's TV commercial suddenly appears, and the moment Phil sees him, he seems to recognize him. Later, when Mary arrives at the store, she discovers it's been closed for quite some time. The entrance is covered with notices and warning papers, but the front door is slightly open. She cautiously steps inside and notices the lights flickering on and off intermittently. Guided by instinct, Mary heads down into the basement and finds Clark's notes and maps scattered around the room. That's where she also discovers the strange glowing crack in the wall. Remembering everything Clark told her, she slowly approaches it. Even though she can barely believe what she's seeing, she steps through the wall. On the other side, we realize all the furniture is gone. Mary begins wandering through the massive space while calling out for Clark. She moves into another room filled with office furniture, then passes through a doorway leading into a chamber packed with chairs. The voices can be heard again. Then she notices a drawing scribbled across the wall that reads, "Why think about magic? Make it real." Beside the message is an illustration inspired by one of her own advertisements. Confused, she keeps looking around until she suddenly hears Clark's voice behind her. He tells her she was making too much noise. Startled, Mary turns around and sees him standing there with a strangely calm expression. Curious and uneasy, she asks him where they actually are. Clark replies that this place contains every space that can possibly exist. A sudden noise makes Mary flinch. Clark calmly tells her to relax and assures her there's nothing to be afraid of, that it's only him and she knows him. Then he steps behind her and without warning begins choking her until she loses consciousness. Meanwhile, we see another piece of Mary's past. After the incident from her childhood, her mother was committed to a psychiatric institution, leaving Mary completely alone. That abandonment deeply scarred her life and explains many of the emotional wounds she still carries in the present. The story then returns to the Backrooms, where Mary wakes up captive while Clark speaks to her with an unsettling calmness. He explains that his entire life he's searched for answers over and over again, trying to make sense of everything that's happened to him. But no matter what he does, he always ends up trapped in the same emptiness. As he talks, we see him carefully placing dishes onto a table, almost like he's preparing a completely normal dinner. Inside the room, several other figures stand motionless as well. A man wearing a striped shirt, a person sitting in a wheelchair, and the strange woman who chased Clark through the hallways earlier. Clark explains to Mary that this place slowly keeps people for itself, consuming them little by little. He says the Backrooms transform people into something else entirely, hollow beings that exist like fragments of memories. According to him, that's how these impossible spaces are created, from broken memories, forgotten lives, and people trapped between dimensions. To prove it, he grabs a knife and stabs one of the figures, but there's absolutely no reaction. Clark calmly explains that they don't feel anything anymore. They don't experience pain, emotions, or even ego anymore. They simply exist, motionless, like pieces of furniture, trapped inside that endless labyrinth. Then, with disturbing calmness, Clark opens a cavity in the abdomen of one of the figures and pulls out a strange cotton-like material from inside. He carefully places it onto the plates while explaining that they can even feed off them. Then he shows Mary something even more horrifying. Inside the refrigerator sits the severed head of his former boss. Horrified, Mary tries to stay calm and tells Clark she wants to help him, but first, he needs to untie her. Clark immediately refuses. Desperate, Mary starts apologizing for not believing him earlier, but Clark seems completely lost inside some kind of delusion now. He decides to recreate one of the role-playing exercises they used to do during therapy sessions. He turns off the lights in the room. Then he cuts off the hair of the strange woman and places it onto Mary, forcing her to play the role of his wife Barbara inside his twisted reenactment. That's when the scene begins. With his voice shaking, Clark takes on the role of a frustrated husband. He starts yelling at her for breaking a glass and waking him up. He tells her he knows how much she likes going to sleep early, but he had to stay late working at the store. Little by little, his tone starts becoming more aggressive. He keeps blaming her, saying he's the one paying for everything, and that if they really want to start a family, then she also needs to work and help support them financially. The fake argument quickly turns into a terrifying outburst of real resentment, exposing all the frustration, loneliness, and desperation Clark had been carrying inside for years. Finally, Mary gets tired of feeding into Clark's fantasy and decides to tell him the truth. She confesses that he got thrown out of the house because of his own actions. It wasn't because of the alcohol or because he was drunk, like he always wanted to believe. The real reason was his constant complaining, his inability to take responsibility, and his habit of always blaming everyone else whenever something went wrong. Mary tells him that's always been his biggest problem. He never accepts that anything could possibly be his fault. Her words hit Clark hard. For a moment, he actually seems to understand. He admits that he knows he needs to stop acting this way, that he spent years trying to change, but never really knew how. Mary calmly explains that she also tried to find a way to help him, but she couldn't do it. She tells him maybe he can still reflect on all of this, but before that can happen, he needs to let her go first. Clark stays silent. Then, after a few long seconds, he slowly walks toward her and begins untying her restraints. For a moment, it seems like he finally accepted what she said. But right then, the strange woman who had been standing motionless beside them suddenly panics and starts searching for a way out. That's when the creature from the drawing appears. Still confused, Clark casually introduces Mary to it, saying she's his therapist and that she's about to leave. He even insists there's no reason to worry because Mary thinks he doesn't need to change, but the creature says nothing. In one brutal movement, it lifts Clark off the ground and viciously attacks him. As Clark bleeds out, Mary takes advantage of the chaos and escapes. She runs through a doorway and suddenly finds herself in what looks like an outdoor street, except it's still inside the Backrooms. The creature keeps chasing her through endless rooms filled with lamps, abandoned furniture, and impossible spaces. During the escape, Mary trips and crashes hard onto the floor. Injured and limping, she still forces herself to keep running while the creature follows close behind. During her escape, Mary reaches what looks like an endless abyss. With no other choice, she starts climbing the walls until she finally manages to escape the creature. But when she reaches the top, she discovers something disturbing. She's inside a place almost identical to Clark's store, except the furniture is completely different. Hoping she's finally found a way out, Mary rushes to the front door and desperately tries to open it, but it won't move. That's when she realizes the horrifying truth. The Backrooms have claimed her too. Suddenly, the creature appears again. The monster looks exactly like the disturbing drawing Mary saw earlier inside the Backrooms. Chaos erupts as it attacks violently while the entire place seems to enter some kind of alert mode. Mary tries to escape, but a strange gas released from the fire extinguishers slowly weakens her. When the creature finally catches up, she grabs the stone connected to her past and smashes it against the monster, stunning it just long enough for her to escape. Mary runs through endless hallways and impossible spaces until she finally seems to find a way out. But just as she thinks she's safe, several people in protective suits suddenly knock her out using gas. Shocked, they admit they can't understand how she escaped alive. Mary is taken to a secret facility where doctors run multiple medical tests on her. While being escorted through the building, she notices they also have the creature's body. Soon after, Phil appears before her, the same man who had been secretly watching both her and Clark through surveillance cameras. He asks how she entered the Backrooms, and Mary explains that she passed through a hidden wall inside the basement of a furniture store. Phil then reveals the truth. Years ago, his organization accidentally discovered the Backrooms while building resonance machines. Since then, they've dedicated themselves to studying the place. He also confesses that he was once trapped there himself and has spent years trying to map its endless spaces, even though he still doesn't fully understand how it works. Phil explains that more and more entrances to the Backrooms are appearing around the world, and nobody knows what the consequences could be. Mary asks what they'll do with her now that she knows the truth. But before anyone can answer, she begins dissociating. Memories from her childhood suddenly come flooding back. Fragments of her demolished house, flashes of her mother, and objects she lost years ago. That's when we finally understand the terrifying truth Clark mentioned before. The Backrooms preserve fragments of human memories. Throughout those endless spaces, pieces of the past remain trapped forever, including Mary's books, photographs of Kat and Bobby, and forgotten memories from everyone who entered. Then, deep inside the Backrooms, we see a woman who looks exactly like Mary, but empty inside, just like the other emotionless beings. A replica born from her own memories. And with that disturbing revelation, the movie reaches its shocking ending. And yeah, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this recap and want to see more breakdowns like this one, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the movie and what ending you want me to cover next. See you guys in the next video.